spreadsheets and stuff like that. I mean, someone was just asking me about it last night. They're like, does it feel like a normal nationals? And I was like, not quite, but like the prep feels pretty much like it always does. So that part at least is familiar. And I'm definitely excited to see what these teams are going to bring, because I can't remember the last time I went in a nationals with so much uncertainty about what teams were going to put on the field.
Yeah, and we're going to break it all down. We're going to look through every pool. We're going to make our picks from quarterfinals onwards. We are going to make our hashtag the game picks, of course, talk about, potential upset alerts and a whole lot more. First, catch up on what happened this week, because we have lots of Ultimate happening in December, which is a rarity. But the Western Ultimate League held its Winter Cup over the weekend. 6 teams coming down to San Diego for a I don't quite know how to describe the scoring. I mean, it was kind of like a combo. Every team got 2 games. You scored points based on getting wins. You scored points based on being the top of statistical categories, also fan engagement on social media. And when all the cards, fell to the table, Keith, going getting the win at the Winter Cup. And, we talked about it in our preview last week. We were like, oh, Utah is an interesting team. We'll see how they didn't just win, Keith. I think they looked very clearly like the best team.
I can't argue with that. And you were pretty high on them. I'll give you your props. I think you were pretty high on both of the teams outside of the California hubs in Seattle. You felt like Utah and Arizona could do pretty well, and both of those things didn't necessarily come true. But I was pretty low on them, and I was forced to eat my words, and it was a lot of fun to do it, because Utah looked, not only did they look like a good team that was playing quality ultimate, but they were exciting. They were fun to watch, and there was great energy online, getting a chance to watch them. What was the energy like there in person?
I think very, very positive round. I think people were really excited, and were exciting and filled with highlight plays. I mean, I feel like in ways there were more clear and obvious top tier highlights this weekend than I saw Club Nationals. And, sometimes that's just how it breaks down. I was on my one select number of games. Not that there weren't some tremendous plays at Club Nationals, but I felt like the kind of quantity of high quality plays was there this weekend. And on Sports Center, Cody Lippincott with a huge full extension layout, one of a number of really top plays. And I just think the biggest stories came from the kind of lesser known teams. I really think, Megan Maxfield is somebody who made a name for herself during the club season, to show off, extreme levels of athleticism for Utah, some huge layout blocks. And, you mentioned got to give it up to Mac Keston, who was just center handle position for Utah, throwing hammers, big 75-yard hucks, and just awesome to watch.
Don't you leave out Paige Kircher from this bomb squad. Paige Kircher dropping some serious dimes. I was talking about it on Twitter. Just these gorgeous forehands that just sat perfectly flat out in front of receivers. Very, very impressive work from the Wildcast.
Well, we hope you're joining us right now on YouTube. We are live and taking your questions, so please feel free to hit. Keith, before we talk college, just a little more Western Ultimate League. Were you surprised by the underperformance, I would say, of but also San Francisco?
Absolutely. I mean, we were singing their praises. I think me even more so than you, in particular San Francisco. But also, I spoke about how I thought Seattle's experience together could offer them some advantages. And I think that they had some good moments, but it was disappointing all around. I mean, San Francisco was very close to not winning either of their 2 games. And the 2 teams finished 4th and 5th in the standings. And that's despite the fact that I'm pretty sure Seattle won the Instagram contest. So even with the extra points, the help didn't work for them. So, I was very impressed with Cheryl Sue again, but the rest of the Seattle team didn't quite deliver in the way that I had hoped.
Yeah, and San Francisco coming out pretty. They do get a win in game 2, but like you said, it was close. was the other team that went 2-0 this weekend, and they threw Los Angeles in the final game of the weekend.
Unbelievable.
LA had on Saturday and then just looked terrible on Sunday. I mean, it wasn't even it was the least interesting game, least competitive game. And San Diego was very close to winning outright on the weekend, but I think the statistics really helped push Utah over the top. But a solid performance from Super Bloom and of an interesting team. I think the one thing I do come away from the weekend feeling, though, Keith, we had a lot of close games. I feel like a league is really going to work well. Teams getting wins and losses. It doesn't feel like there's one team that's really overpowered compared to the other teams. Certainly you could imagine San Francisco is going to be better when they have a chance to get for a normal season. But on the other hand, part of the thing that makes is that they get players from all over California because people want to go and win. And when it comes for pro, people play with their hometown team. So you're not seeing all of the San Diego and LA top players commuting north to play with San Francisco. It levels the playing field quite a bit.
It certainly does. While I love watching Revo Pro do their thing, we were kind of absent of that overbearing team. That I think can kind of dominate the PUL conversation in a lot of ways. And there was some parity that we've all been clamoring for at high level women's ultimate, but it's very easy to see a future for the league with this kind of quality of play, with this level of star power, and especially if we were to see the East and West kind of unite in the women's ultimate sphere in semi-pro ultimate. It's very easy to see how that could lead to some really compelling stories. And for this event to get not only the buzz and the excitement going, but the kind of professionalism that we saw, I think that bodes really well, given that there was so little to work with. I mean, you really just had players on the field and some cameras. You didn't have a lot of ways to build it up. So you can imagine with some runway how the Western Ultimate League could be a really exciting environment for storytelling and for star building.
Yeah, and I want to give credit. I mean, I was there at the event on the streaming side, on the production side. I work a lot of ultimate events. Obviously, I've streamed many things for. I just want to give a shout out to the Western Ultimate League because I felt like the organization from the people who were in charge of kind of managing the weekend and getting everything ready to go was extremely good. And I think that showed through in kind of the product that was kind of put out there. I feel like there's real promise for the league. I think if you're gonna nitpick, right, there weren't a ton of fans. It's not like there weren't people there. There were, but you weren't packing the stadium. And I think we got a question a couple weeks ago, Keith. How many fans can they get to 1,000 fans? And certainly no individual game even came close to getting 1,000 fans. I have no idea how many people came over the course of the weekend, but that's going to be the challenge. And that is the challenge for Ultimate Frisbee right now. The product is good. I think you're seeing when you watch these pro games, it's a quality product. It was a quality product this weekend. Great plays. The pace of the game is so... I just want to go on my soapbox for a second. If the club game...
I've heard this
if the club game does not evolve, it is going to die. I'm serious. Okay, when we games with way less time between polls, instant referral for observers, just the pace of the game, so much better than club. When I'm hearing the same thing from coaches, and I'm hearing the same thing from players, and I'm hearing the same thing from observers, I think that USA Ultimate's rules committee needs to get with the times. We cannot continue to have polls, 90 seconds and timeouts. There's no reason for stuff to take this long. You end up having people standing around waiting for the game to happen. And instead, we have these pro games where it's just a crisp level of play. The field width, great, right? This is like the hybrid rule set that is correct. It's the normal size field, 7-on-7. I'm fine with observers instead of refs. Great. They make immediate calls. We are headed in the right direction for what the rule set should look like, and club needs to catch up.
And it's funny you mentioned the rules and the pace, and to me, one of the biggest parts of that is the 7 second stall count. I know we all say that the 10 second stall count is really more like seven based on the way people actually count it, but whatever the actual timing is, the pace of disc movement and of just offensive flow, I think in the semi-pro leagues has gotten better in a way that the club game hasn't been able to match. And we still are excited by Club Ultimate because of the level of play, but it does seem like it's getting close to being time for an adaptation.
All right. Well, exciting weekend overall for the Western Ultimate League, and they're getting ready to start their season up in March. In March. So we're just a couple months away from their first official season. So that should be exciting. We'll see what happens with rosters and how things shake out. But the other thing, great jerseys, great logos in general. I feel like the when you look at the branding of the Western Ultimate League, I think they're doing it better than the PUL and the AUDL. What do you think about
I
that?
should have brought my Falcons jersey, which is definitely has a nice crisp look to it. Although, yeah, tough day for Falcons fans, I'd say. Not that I don't know anything about those words as a Falcons fan. Anyway.
Okay, so let's turn our attention to the college championships. Again, hit us up in the chat if you have questions, comments. I'm actually not looking at the chat at this moment. Is there any follow-up stuff we need to do, Keith, for Western Ultimate League before we move on?
No, not with the Western Ultimate League. Max Colvette, they did mention that the fan fantasy points, which they won from their fan or someone who had chosen them as a representative team winning the fantasy competition, was enough to push them over for the win for San Diego. They beat San Diego by like 2 total points on the weekend, and the fantasy points were the cherry on top there.
There it is. It actually mattered. It actually mattered. After going 2-0, you got to find the extra points somewhere. So it makes sense. Okay, so college nationals is here. We've got 72 teams coming to I don't know what the Valley. I don't really know what to call this part of California. I'm currently in Riverside, California, which is just a little bit east of Norco, where the tournament is taking place, and a lot to break down. And we got picks to make and everything. So let's dive in. Where do you want to start?
I have the men's division open in front of me, so that feels like the right place to start then.
All right. So as we kind of went through the pools a little bit last week, we're going to go deep dive, though. Let's start in Pool A. It's North Carolina Darkside, Texas Tough, Michigan Magnum, Wisconsin Hodags, and the UCSD Air Squids. That is Pool A. Clearly, UNC going to be the heavy favorite here, but an intriguing pool, with some classic, a bunch of just big state schools, which I think is a lot of fun.
And, to be honest with you, I like all these teams. Like, I think they all could be good, which is both good and bad. I mean, it leads to potentially really compelling play in pool play, but it also means that, it's going to be a tough test for any of these teams to get out, and that, usually it might be really exciting to be like, oh, well, Wisconsin could be a really good 4 seed, but guess what? Every other team in their pool is good too. So they could both be a good 4 seed. For all I know, they could be the best 4 seed and still finish 4th or 5th in the pool. So this one is an unusually strong to me Pool A based on my read. I mean, I know you've been a big supporter of this Texas team that has a big veteran core, that we've kind of been waiting for them to take that big step forward. Michigan's been building up over the past couple of seasons. They had a great recruiting class last time we saw them in 2019. That should be in a great position to do very well for them, as well as some of their veterans at the top too. And then, Wisconsin has some really, really high profile recruits, I think, that maybe went under the radar in some ways, but are going to end up being high profile by the end of this tournament, I think. And plus, the programmatic strength of Wisconsin and UC San Diego coming out of a really tough Southwest. Top that all off with a UNC team that I think most people would peg as the title favorites. And Pool A is a full of tough customers.
It sure is. I think, it's interesting. Texas, a team that went into the bracket at the college championships in 2019. A lot of their top performers are back. Vinay Valsaraj, the Chambers brothers, Matt Armour. I think the question for Texas is depth. Is it going to be enough to have a top end that's going to be as competitive as any of the tournament? Uh, I'm not sure. I think, they get a good early test against Michigan because this Michigan team was one of the big surprise stories of the 2020 season that got cut short. And, they've got a very solid team. They've got a ton of players on their roster. I mean, huge. But like Zion Johnson, Theo Shapinski, Jared Schwally, like there's a lot of guys who may not be, big like club level names like some of the guys on Texas are, but they're good. And this was one of the most exciting teams that we saw in 2020 that looked like they were kind of like on the rise, and they get those players back. I'm quite as sold. The 13-10 over Indiana in the regional final. I mean, it's a win, but I'd like to see that be a little bit more convincing to feel better about this team. But I think that Texas-Michigan game is going to be very interesting, and you want to win that one if you're going to feel like you got a good chance to get into the quarterfinals.
Definitely, and the pool D is usually known as the pool of death, and that's the crossover pool for Pool A. So I know that these teams are going to be fighting for positioning because being saddled as the third team, the team that makes it to pre-quarters but has to cross over with the second team in Pool D. I mean, that could be a really tough ask. I mean, even the second spot could be a tough ask, and then getting in front of UNC to try and escape all of that is going to be nearly impossible. So, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overrating UNC. Texas and Michigan have both proven to be really good, I think, in the past couple of seasons. So, could we see a pool play upset? It certainly wouldn't be the first time we've seen the number one seed go down in pool play. But with the way that they're lined up against Pool D, there's a lot of motivation for these teams to do well in pool play.
Steven Milardovich says in the chat that UCSD is going to win games in this pool. Yeah, I mean, sure. I feel like we don't know the relative strength of regions right now. UCSD coming in second place in the Southwest, good result. Like, how are they going to stack up? Like, I can definitely see them beating Wisconsin. I can definitely see that. How good is Michigan? I don't know that we got that question fully answered in 2020. We're going to get it answered now. Hugo Sauter asks, is this the most difficult pool that UNC has faced at nationals in a while? Well, I certainly think that a Texas-Michigan combo seeds is more challenging than your typical seeds at those 8 and 12 positions. I mean, Michigan is a 12, like they're a pool 2 seed in my mind in a 3 spot. And Texas, is not going to be a pushover. Will UNC really get challenged?
That's
just think they're that
question
good
to me. I mean, I think that this pool looks pretty similar in stacked strength to what they faced in some ways in 2019. Now they cruised through that pool, but for a reminder, they had an Ohio State team that went into the bracket and pasted Washington to reach the quarterfinals. And that's what Ohio State did in pre-quarters, and a Georgia team that barely lost to a Colorado team that obviously looked really good down the bracket as well. And they had Minnesota as the 4th team in their pool. So this was a pretty solid pool for them in 2019, and UNC just made them look pretty average with their performance. They may get some of that pool 1 effect that we talk about all the time, which, teams are like, okay, we don't need to, if we're not going to beat UNC, like, let's make sure that we have everything we need to beat the rest of this pool because we know it's going to be tough. That's that 8, 12, 13 scrunch that we talk about every college national. So that effect may take place here, but I imagine that all these teams are going to want to take their shot at UNC and see what they can do because they don't know how it's such a short season. You're not going to get a lot of chances to take your big shots at teams.
Yeah, I mean, you got to at least come out in the first half and try to get a game. I mean, you can't just assume that UNC is going to beat you. That's not the way to go into nationals. I do think that if you get to halftime and you're down 8-3, then maybe say, let's get the Rooks some run. Like, you don't need to win that game. So we'll talk more about UNC a little later.
8-5 is the danger score because that's where you're like, I don't know which one to do.
Okay, let's go to Pool B. It's Colorado Mama Bird, Cal Poly Slowcore, Georgia Joja, Northeastern. Are they Huskies?
They are.
They're Huskies? Okay. And State USULT, USULT. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that's what I'm going with. Could be USULT, either way. And so that is your Pool B. two powerhouse West Coast teams, and then some interesting teams from around the rest of the country. Georgia, the Southeast champ, Northeastern, strong team from the Northeast, and then of course Utah State, the surprise qualifier out of the Northwest. Keith, break it down.
Well, Charlie, I want to ask you about something. So I saw this, I think yesterday. Cal Poly tweeting to crack some jokes about Cody Mills, their coach, and with a graphic of his secret plays, and crossed out is Caleb, which I believe refers to Miriam, with the word graduated next to him. Can't use that play anymore. Then 2 is Connor, can't crossed out, broken ankle. Is that Connor Schofield? And does that mean we're not going to see Connor Schofield for this Cal Poly SLO team? That would be a big loss for them. I mean, they're deep, and they're certainly no strangers to having to deal with
this
injuries.
Team, man. This team is the world's most snake bit team on the planet when it comes to injuries. There's only one Connor on the roster, so who else could that be? That hurts them.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, they are a little less deep than what we've seen from them before. I mean, obviously they've got some players who can pick up the slack there, and KJ Koo, who's the next person on that joke graphic, but Calvin Brown, Jake Thorne, some of the names I think the players behind them, they're kind of like 5 through 10, are probably underrated in general. If that's your Morgan Summers or your Sam Wiedegardners, I think those players are going to be able to compete. But that has me a little worried, because Connor Schofield could be the best player on this team. So going up against a team like Colorado, you're not going to want to come in shorthanded.
They're not going to beat Colorado. They weren't going to beat Colorado. I mean, I think Cody Mills is worth a point or two in games as a coach. I think that actually schematically, there are some coaches that can get their team a little bit of an edge. That Mills will have some good concepts, but I just don't know that this slow core team. Now, let me say this first. The recruiting has gotten a lot better there because of the success the team has had. I have no idea how good their rookies and sophomores are. It feels like a team that's going to be fairly reliant on their top players, of which they have some very good ones. KJ Koo and Calvin Brown hold it down. Yeah, they're probably going to be good. I don't think they're good enough to be. I think the real question is, how do they stack up with Georgia? Once again, this 2-3 spot, more interesting to me than the 1-2. And Georgia looked very good at Southeast Regionals, playing against, let's be honest, weak competition. That athleticism shined through. They're a team that feels potentially susceptible to me to, smart defensive things like force middle, the stuff that Mills is going to throw. But, having talked to Georgia, the captains after that game, they talked about how they are focusing on trying to get to the level of the UNCs of the universe, and that they've retooled some of their structures. This is going to be a fascinating matchup, especially if Cal Poly is banged up a little bit with some injuries.
I'm still lukewarm on Georgia, if only because of their lack of the someone in our Discord put it, the college masters. So the yes. Sixth and seventh years. Obviously there's still a bunch of talent on this team, but that does cool me a little bit on them. And we were both, I think, impressed with what Northeastern was able to do at regionals, even though they weren't able to overcome Brown. So, I'm a little worried about this pool. I think in general, it's quite a bit weaker than what we were talking about in Pool A. Colorado is going to be in a very strong position. Now, SLO and Colorado played in pool play in 2019. SLO won that game by 13-10, I believe was the final score. So, I don't know how much we can't say that Colorado's known for their innovation. They're they're a team that has a system. They've been running the system for a while. So that if you're going to say that the coaching is a big advantage for SLO, maybe that helps with them dealing with Colorado. But I just don't know what to do with the teams behind Colorado in this pool. I remember being big on Utah State even in 2019. They disappointed then, but they're here now. They have some players. So could they upset somebody? I wouldn't rule it out.
Sure, they could.
But I really don't know how to rate SLO in Georgia. And I think Northeastern's pretty good, but not great. So this pool feels a little bit lower to me and very, very difficult to pick in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see looks against higher quality competition. But let's not forget, right? So they don't get their graduates. That hurts, no question. But they also have done some of the best recruiting of the last few years.
Hmm.
Aiden Downey is on this team. Aiden Downey was easily the most promising freshman, 2 years ago now? And look, like the kid's really good. Hayden Austin Nab is really good. This team has a lot of very strong players. They've pulled players in the Southeast for the last couple of years. And I think that, you could see that it's the sophomores and juniors that are steering the ship for this Georgia team. Whether that's enough to overcome playing against 23-year-old 60ers, well, I guess we're going to find out.
Yeah, Colorado's got the whole package there. Got the young guys, got the 6th and 7th years. That's why they're so scary.
Do we need to give a little more respect to Northeastern here? We're not really talking about them. This is a team that's been kind of on the slow and steady come up. And, they didn't beat Brown at regionals, but they're a solid team. They've been beating good teams. Benfield is going to be one of the best players at the tournament. Could they get wins? Could we see them upset a Georgia or a Cal Poly?
I just don't know what to make of them. I mean, watching them on tape, they've added Gus Norbaum. He's obviously outstanding addition as a center handler for them. Benfield, who I think is probably at his best as your primary downfield defender. I think he's kind of pushed into a bigger offensive role for this team, which works as a big receiver. The guy's got a lot of length to work with. But I think that those two are going to be able to compete with any duo that they come across. It's going to be about how does the rest of this depth perform when matched up with top level teams. I think that on tape, they look pretty good. I give them a fighting chance against Sloan Georgia, even if I would make them an underdog in both of those matchups.
All right, let's turn our attention to Pool C. Washington, Carleton, Ohio State, UNC Wilmington, and Cornell. Very interesting pool. And some real power at the top with Washington and Carleton. Keith, your initial takes on Pool C.
It's another tough one. I mean, we talked about this when we did the pool previews. These are very balanced pools. This is a Washington team that looks like they have every right to be considered a top challenger to UNC and Colorado. A lot of elite club experience, plenty of depth on this team. So they look pretty fearsome. And Carleton, I mean, is there a team that inspires more divisive reactions in men's college ultimate fans? I don't know if there is. Obviously, the names. You're Dylan Lanier's, Ethan Bloodworth coming off an awesome club season. Andrew Roy. I mean, what the top end of this team's going to look like. The recruiting reputation. It's going to be another strong class, I think, from Carleton. If they're a team that you're less worried that they're missing those older players. But again, this is not going to be an easy pool, and Carleton has had mixed success in high pressure situations. So you really never know which team you're going to get from them. And Ohio State, we talked about this again in the pool preview. They play this great game against Pitt in the final. They play a much closer game than you would expect against Temple in the backdoor game. How much of that goes to the weather? How much of that is like, oh, nobody can score and going in this direction, so these games are just low scoring slogs. Anyway, we like the talent on Ohio State. I think people are probably underrating their depth, but it's can be a concerning way to look at this team. They did well though in 2019, and I think that's going to help them a lot here. And UNC Wilmington, I like them too. So another pool in Pool C that I really have trouble measuring exactly what to expect out of the middle of these teams.
I'm hitting the fade Carleton button. Bang, 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 bang. I think Washington dominates this pool. I don't actually that close. I think Washington beats Cut like 13-8. Like, I don't think it's going to be close. Yes, there's some top-end talent on Carleton. Yes, they have some great recruits. But yes, we've also seen them underperform. Are they ready even to play without Joe White? Because they didn't look it in 2020. And Washington, on the other hand, is so deep and has just been getting the better players out of Seattle lately. The great Seattle players used to go to Carleton. They've been going to Washington lately. Look at this team. It's crazy. Jack Brown, Tony Vanieri, Derek Murad, Gabe Port, Jake Steen. Like they're they are they have two full lines of starter quality players, and that is
Didn't
not
even
true of
mention
a lot of
Lucas
other
Chen.
teams. Lucas Chen. Look, I just think that Washington's legitimately a title threat, and I don't think Carleton is. So I actually think that this isn't going to be that compelling of a pool because I think Washington's going to dominate.
That part, I'm much more inclined to believe than I am of what's going to happen after that. I mean, I think that Wilmington is kind of a sleeper, and if they were in Pool B, I might be thinking that they could finish second in the pool. I might still think that in Pool C, given that I'm with you, that I'm a little low on Carleton. I mean, when I look at this Wilmington roster, I see a lot of names that I'm impressed with. Whether it's obviously we talk about Connor Russell, but Ethan Elizard, he had a great year in 2019. I was really high on Cole Feltman in 2019. Kevin Huerta's back. Jack Liebling's on the squad. This is a team that's going to be pretty good. And I think they had, a less than exciting regionals. That's where it makes me want to temper. But that middle three, Carleton, Ohio State, UNC, Wilmington, I mean, I feel like they could finish in any order.
I buy it, especially if you think the AC is that good. Because the reason to be skeptical of a Wilmington is that third in the AC, and they get basically blown out by both UNC and NC State. They lose 15-9 to NC State. They lose 14-6 to UNC. Then they beat everybody else. But the thing is, UNC, we all think is the top team in the country. NC State, I think, is a quarterfinalist. So where do they fit in relative to a team like Ohio State that finished second in, behind a good Pitt team, no doubt. But I'm not convinced that Pitt is a world beater this year. I don't really think they're in the clear conversation for winning the tournament. So I wouldn't be shocked to see UNC Wilmington outperform. I think all the AC teams could end up in quarters.
There's an interesting prop bet in the chat right now from UltiWorld D3 editor, men's D3 editor Michael Ball. Which team makes it further in their respective tournament? Cut or Carleton chop the D3 men's team? They're the 9 seed overall in D3 men's.
9 seed overall. They've got Oklahoma Christian and Franciscan ahead of them in their pool. I'm going to take cut, but it's close.
I think I'm going to take chop here. I think they have a pretty strong history of their performance at nationals. Carleton a little bit more of a mixed bag, fewer teams, and I think a better chance to finish second or first in their pool. So I'm going to take chop, but it's a good prop.
It is a good prop. All right, let's turn our attention to Pool D, typical pool of death. Maybe it is this year too. Very strong teams at the top. Brown, Pittsburgh, NC State, Tulane, and Illinois are your 5 teams. I mean, I feel bad for Tulane and Illinois because I think they're going to get smoked by the top 3 teams in this. But those top 3 teams, quite interesting. Where does NC State fit into this mix? Brown and Pitt clearly have the longer and more historic pedigree, but I think NC State is a very, very tough 3 seed.
Is NC State bringing all 65 people that were on the roster that they tweeted out originally?
I don't know.
I mean, they need 4 or 5 Airbnbs.
The official Nationals roster is huge. It looks like it has about 35 players on it.
That's a lot of sideline presence because you probably can't fit all those people on the field. NC State. It's hard to escape that we spent all these years talking about their inability to make it through regionals, the ghosts of regionals past for them. They finally break through. They get to nationals, and there's all this hype. I think they were the 7 seed overall, and they come in. They're a little injury rattled at 2019, and disappointing. I mean, they go 1-3. They miss the bracket. They faced off against that Brown team in 2019 in that pool. Do we start to write a new narrative about NC State? Maybe they're not ready for nationals. I don't know. It's probably a bit harsh after one shot at it. But this is not going to be an easy pool. I think that they're probably quite a bit better than Tulane and Illinois. We did get called out on Twitter, I think, for hating on Tulane. So unfortunately, that is not going to abate at this moment, given the distance I feel like
We're not
between them.
hating. We're not hating. We're just being realistic about the team.
Well, not if Tulane comes out and beats somebody seated above them, then then we look
I'll
like
be the
haters.
first to give them credit.
Yeah. NC State deep. There's a lot of players with a high level club experience that have been high level college producers. They're going to be a good test for Brown and Pittsburgh. I wouldn't be surprised to see another one of those three-way ties in this pool. I wouldn't be surprised to see Pittsburgh, Brown, and NC State trade losses and go to point diff. I mean, that feels very much within the realm of possibility. I am very high on Brown right now. I mean, I am feeling Brown. They look great on tape.
You like what you like what you see on tape, huh?
Yeah, I just think that the players that were kind of their young stars at one point, the future guys, Jock Nissen and Leo Gordon in particular, the future's now for them. I mean, Jock Nissen, you've been seeing what he's been doing in the AUDL. He looks like a consummate veteran. He is ready to be a star at the college level, and they did not lose the guys at the top outside of Mac Hecht. I mean, you look at the roster, Dylan Villeneuve's there, Ken No is there, Aziz Adiemi is there.
Callahan
Saul
nominee.
Wishmeyer-Bailey's there. Ben Taruno's there. I mean, these guys are all back. So with John Randolph, can all the rest of these players step up just enough to replace the production of Mac Hecht, plus adding Nissen and Gordon? I mean, I think that there's a lot to like about Brown, and I like their chances of making a deep run.
I do too. But we're going to get to our picks in just a second, and I think it will become clear. I mean, I think that the teams, the seeding's not random, folks. Like, I feel like the teams at the top of the seeding are the best teams, like pretty clearly. And I think we could see a lot of chaos in the lower seeds among, some upsets we didn't see coming, some surprises. Maybe we get a surprise team or two in quarters. But I think when it all shakes out and we get to semis, it's going to be these top teams. We're not going to have some shock. Tulane's not going to semis, folks. Sorry. And I think what's interesting to me, I'm actually more interested to see if NC State can win this pool than Pitt. I just don't think Pitt's got enough depth to beat Brown. And I think that NC State beating Pitt in pool
Spicy.
Play. Yeah.
Are you sleeping on? They got Michael Ing, right? He might be the best.
I do.
He might be the best player of this tournament.
I understand. We've seen Pitt with great Michael Ing as their best player, and they were okay. They were good, but they weren't great. And I think that that's what we see here as well.
Interesting. I am higher on Pitt than you are, but you don't have to push hard to get me to root for Trevor Lynch. I've been a big fan I've been a big conductor on the Trevor Lynch hype train, and so I would love to see that come to fruition.
I mean, they got a lot of good players. By the way, they have 42 players on their roster. I don't know how many of them are coming to nationals. Okay, so I guess let's get to our picks, Keith. Let's do it.
All right. So where do you want to start? In quarterfinals, huh?
Well, why don't we start with who do you have winning the pools? I think we both made these selections.
All right. Yeah. So I have UNC winning their pool. I've Pitt winning their pool.
Wow.
Washington and Colorado also winning their pools. I look, I don't want to underrate the Ing brothers, and Dan Goldstein still pounding around.
You just got done telling me how great you thought Brown was.
That doesn't mean that they can't drop a game in pool play. Yeah. We've certainly seen it before. We've seen good teams lose games in pool play. So Pitt tends to do well in pool play, in my opinion. So I don't worry. I've still got Brown love to give.
Okay, so I've got the top 4 seeds all winning their pools. I'm going straight chalk, but I think it's justified. I really do. I think that UNC and Colorado are pretty heavy favorites to win their pools. Like I said, I think Washington is the class of Pool C. And while I do think it's like I'm the least confident in Pool D, but I am taking Brown to win that pool. I just think that, having that success, winning a title, knowing what that takes, running it back, the development that their young players have gotten, Randolph looking like one of the best players, at Club Nationals in the final. I think that this team's just going to be really tough to beat. But NC State I can see is a real threat, and maybe Pitt.
here's my counter argument here, Charlie, and this has informed my picks here.
Okay.
I think you're overrating the chalk because of two reasons. One, we know very little, right? We have very little information about these teams. We don't have a full season to
Sure.
assess them,
Sure.
to get a sense of who's good and who's not. And while we may think that this looks like the most accurate seeding, I just feel like we're going to be wrong because we just have less to work with to inform that seeding. So I'm already going in anticipating some violations of the seeding here. The second thing is these teams have not had a lot of chances to get reps together. And to me, that's going to lead to inconsistency. So it leads to something like Pitt winning their pool, but then maybe fumbling in the bracket. It leads to something like three-way ties in pools where a team plays poorly in one round and well in another round. I mean, I think that you're going to see that exacerbated this college nationals as these teams not only have less reps together, but just usually when we go into nationals, teams have spent 8 months playing together. You're cutting that time in half right now. So less quality reps, less overall time together. Some of that is made up for by the vets who have returned. That's years that they've played together too. But I think that's not going to make up for the fact that in a lot of ways it's early in the season. Think of what CCC looks like, Charlie. High quality teams going out there and doing weird stuff. And yes, this is not CCC. Their teams are going to be a lot more buttoned up than they are at Class City Classic. But that it is still the December. These teams have been together for 2 months.
And they're not practicing together necessarily. I mean, maybe some have that luxury, but many are going to just have players showing up to play. I get it. But I expect that is basically going to be equally distributed amongst all of these teams. And therefore, I think the teams that have clear, proven players who've delivered in club, delivered in the AUDL, delivered in the semi-pro leagues across the board, and have had a history of success and, continuity of coaching and players, those are the teams that I expect to do well at the end of the day. Could we be shocked? Of course. I count for that, but I just don't see these particularly the top three in UNC, Colorado, and Washington. They're just to lose their pools. That's what I think.
I have all three of them winning their pools, so on that I agree. But I'm expecting some surprises this weekend. So I'm trying to nail them, knowing that taking shots is going to make it harder for me to land right on exactly the right spot.
Okay, so let's move on. Who do you have in those matchups in quarterfinals, getting in out of pre-quarters?
All right, so I have UNC taking on Carleton in quarters. I have Pitt taking on UNC Wilmington. So I'm backing up I'm hyped on UNC Wilmington. I'm backing up on them doing well in their pool. And to make that happen, I believe I have Wilmington placing above Carleton and finishing second in pool seat.
Ooh, I like that.
I've got Washington taking on Brown in their quarterfinal, and I've got Colorado taking on Michigan in their quarterfinal. So no Texas, no NC State, some good teams no SLO, good teams that can't make the bracket. I mean, there's only 8 spots, so you can't fit every good team. But this is the 8 I'm rolling with for right now.
Okay, so I have UNC taking on Georgia in their quarterfinal, Colorado taking on NC, Washington taking on Pitt, and Brown taking on Cal Poly SLO. Although I'm worrying, I'm thinking about hedging on that because of the injury situation. I think I'll stay with it though. So those are my teams, and then I have the top 4 seeds winning. I'm staying with it. I really think that's the clear top 4 here. And so I have UNC facing off against Brown and Colorado facing off against Washington in semifinals.
Charlie, we would have the same picks were it not for me predicting that variance in pool play and having Pitt win their pool. Because I'm with you. I think if I just if we were running this over and over again, I think that the top 4 seeds are the 4 best teams. But I have Brown playing Washington in quarterfinals. So even though I think they're 2 of the 4 best teams, someone's got to go down. And man, do I want to get behind Washington. But this is where I'm going for the surprise. I think Brown takes out Washington in quarterfinals. Disappointment for the Seattle guys, talent withstanding. Sometimes you catch John Randolph and he John Randolphs you. We've seen that happen before. I've got Pitt beating Wilmington, UNC beating Carleton, and Colorado getting a scare, but beating Michigan. So that sets me up for UNC, Pitt, and Brown, Colorado in semifinals.
And who you got else?
I'm not going to shock anybody with this pick. I got North Carolina going to the finals. I think Pitt runs out of steam here.
UNC Pitt is a classic, by the way. That's a
It
national.
is. It is. It is. And Charlie, I'm taking Brown back to the finals. UNC Brown rematch.
There it is. Wow, that would be fun. I have UNC game over Brown in semifinals. I think Brown puts up a good fight. I just think that the depth of UNC outshines here. And I have Colorado getting past Washington in a game that I think will be very good. I think that could be a very interesting, very close game. I will not be shocked if Washington wins. When I sit and I look at the Washington roster, I'm like, okay, this team is going to be super good. Colorado clearly deserves the credit for what they were able to do in the club season, and they have a ton of talent. I think that they have a little bit more experienced talent than Washington, which is relying more on some younger players. But I think the talent of those younger players, I shouldn't knock Colorado though. They had probably the best recruiting class in 2020. So it's going to be a good one, but I'm taking Colorado. I think we're destined for the UNC Mama Bird matchup in the final, and that's what I'm picking.
I get it. It's a very tempting call. A lot of talent. We haven't talked as much probably about Colorado and the specifics there. I have been an unabashed Quinn Finer fan on Twitter. So I'm happy to see him doing. I could see him being player of the year. I really could. I think he's that good. But this is a deep, really talented team, and I think in a great position to give UNC a good push. Someone in our chat, Elias Baldwin, noting that Washington is 3-0 against Brown in the last 3 seasons. Well, you know what you know what they say. It's hard to beat a team 4 times in a row, right?
Spread out. I remember
5 calendar years.
2019 Stanford Invite, Washington Brown pool play matchup, and Brown had all this hype. Washington crushed them in that game. It was crazy. And then Brown eventually went on to win the national championship that season. But yeah, I don't know if it's a matchup thing or what, but I remember it was like Mac Hecht couldn't get open. Ooh, it was and then Mac Hecht was the best player at nationals.
Look, one of these teams has championship pedigree. They've been there and done that, and that's Brown. And that's not true for Washington. And that is, however, true, when you get into your Colorado conversation. Colorado, they've made it to semifinals. They took their lumps. Now they've got this experience at club nationals as well. So we have not seen Washington get that big win at nationals. I would say 2019 was pretty disappointing for them. So does that change? Certainly. It has been a long time since we've seen a lot of these guys play. And there was another note in the chat from Biggest Dog Ever. If there's less data, doesn't that mean that we should favor established chalky teams? So I think that's kind of the angle Charlie's playing. And I disagree, because I think that the data means that we are less likely to know which teams are the chalky established teams. I think we're less likely to identify correctly who those favorites should be. So we're closer to more 50-50 odds.
We are making a lot of assumptions based on data that's 2 years old.
Exactly. And we watch a lot of Ultimate. We've seen a lot of these players play in the club game. I don't think we're going to be super far off. I'm not saying that we don't know anything, but I do expect there to be a little inconsistency.
All right. Well, give us your breakdown of how that final goes in your mind, UNC Brown.
I've got UNC taking control of the final. Brown gives them a tough push. So it's pretty common for these things to start out pretty evenly matched. Then UNC rolls towards half. Maybe they get a late first half push from Brown, and then UNC is going to pull away. I think that this UNC team is just probably one of the best college teams we've ever seen. There's already jokes about the number of coaches they'll have on the sidelines, which is false, because they'll have some in the stands. They'll only have a few on the sidelines, but some will be in the stands on the walkies.
Coordinator up there with binoculars, calling in plays.
They are. Now, don't sell short the Brown alumni, though. We know that they have a pretty big volume of their own. So I like UNC to win the title. Do I think that Colorado or Washington is a good team to play foil to them? Potentially, but man, it's hard for me to look at this UNC team and not see a title team.
I'm with you. I am taking UNC to win the title. I do think it will be a competitive game. Of course, I have them facing off against Colorado, but look, there's a level of continuity in UNC right now. Elite level coaching, players who have come up playing together for many, many years, and an elite like a universe line that has all of the pieces. Like, who Anders Jungst at college nationals? Okay, who's going to do it? No one could cover him in the AUDL. No one could cover him in the club division. You're telling me that the college kids are going to cover him? I don't see it. Or they have speed. Alex Davis. They have throwing. They have, incredible defenders. Elijah Long. Liam Searles Bowes has maybe been a little quiet, but he's going to be one of the best players at the tournament. I just feel like, and from what I understand, of course, their rookies are great, and they have some players who are going to get in there and make an impact. I do not see how you are going to match up with a team that that has a number of players who were major contributors for the AUDL champs and club champs. I just don't see it. Like they're going to run the same plays as Ring, and they're going to get buckets. It's just going to be incredibly difficult to slow them down. Colorado's really they're a very good team. They're an interesting team. I think that they're going to put up a real fight in that game. Danny Landisman is one of the most exciting young players in the sport right now. Alex Atkins is awesome. Calvin Stoughton, Matthew Agee, they're really good. Very, very good. Do not be shocked if they win the tournament. But I think UNC is the clear favorite. I think they're probably 3.5 point favorites in that hypothetical matchup. What do you take there? UNC minus 3.5 if it's Colorado in the final.
I think I take Colorado to cover that, but yeah, it's pretty tough. I mean, you're right. By plays that UNC would run that Ring runs, you mean just everybody move out of the way and Anders cuts to the front cone, right? That's the play.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to stop. By the way, I was wrong. The Brown Washington game I was talking about was 2018. It was before they won the title. They also beat Washington beat Brown in 2019, but it was close. It was like a 1 point game. So thanks to the chat. I got
I'm sorry. This tournament just feels to me like one of those tournaments where well, the outcome's obvious what's going to happen. Then we're going to show up and be like, wow, I don't know how this team lost. I mean, just think of the club championships that we just watched and looking over and you're like, wow, Machine's down 700-2 against the 19th seeded team. How did that happen? It's the things
true.
that feel obvious are not what's going to happen.
Yeah, maybe it'll happen. That's what makes it fun. I feel weird picking chalk at college nationals because it's typically not, but I just look at the teams that have the advantage of alums with all this experience and together as a club team and making club nationals. And it's just hard for me to see those teams, especially it's not like we have no data. Both of those teams dominated their regions, dominated. UNC dominated against a really good NC State team. So why are they suddenly going to fall apart now at nationals? I mean, could it happen? Sure, but I don't expect it. All right, so let's move on. We're going to go over and take a look at the women's division, and let's get it going here, Keith. Pool A. Here is your Pool A: Carleton, UC San Diego, Vermont, Chicago, and FSU. That is your Pool A. Clearly, Carleton going to be the heavy favorite here. Keith, how do you see this pool shaking out?
Well, tough to argue with what Carleton's putting out on the field, but I mentioned in our seeding review that it feels like UC San Diego is a bit underseeded at the 8th seed. I don't know if they have the tools quite to beat Carleton in a rematch that I'm sure everyone's going to be very excited for, despite how many new faces we're going to see. But I do think that they're a pretty impressive team to be the second team in this pool, and it's going to be tough sledding for the teams behind them to get the advantage of them, despite some of the star power that we'll see on Vermont and Chicago. I will say, Charlie, I've got some news for you that I've heard here. I've heard that Kennedy McCarthy, the star of this Vermont team, is questionable with injury and
Uh-oh.
may not be able to participate. So its status is up in the air as of last that I heard, but not great for a team that we think could be a little bit thin and could certainly use having a true dominant star. Yeah,
I got to
not
change.
great
I got to,
news.
Keith. I had Vermont in
Right.
quarters, and I just can't do it now. I can't do it with that news.
I've got good news for Vermont, though it doesn't help them in this tournament. The other word is that Emily Pazzi is going to transfer to Vermont for the spring.
That's exciting.
She's like going to be one of the best first year players in the country. So that's good for them in the spring. You know, healthy Kennedy and Emily Pazzi means, you know, buy your Vermont stock now, but price might be taking a tank for nationals.
Look, UC San Diego. We talked about it last week. I think getting the 8 seed as the number two finisher out of the Southwest behind UCSB. The only team they lost to in the series to this point was UCSB. And, we have Davis ranked pretty high. They end up getting the 14 seed. We think pretty highly of the Southwest region. Of course, we never quite know how the regional strength is going to match up. But if you think that's true, I mean, UC San Diego should be the easy number two finisher here. And honestly, could put up a fight against Carleton. Like Alex Diaz, these are good players. We just watched Alex Diaz look awesome at the Western Ultimate League Winter Cup. So I will not be surprised if we see Diaz be one of the most impressive players at college nationals. I don't think I'm going to pick them to upset Carleton. I just don't think they have the depth to compete with what Carleton brings to the table. But I do think that they will comfortably finish number two, even if Kennedy McCarthy's playing for Vermont.
I do have some more information for you, some more inside
Wow,
info.
wow.
Carleton UCSD is last round, I believe, on Friday, 12:30 round on Friday in this pool. Carleton may be without both Earhart sisters for that game, who I think
Flying
are
in
hoping
Friday?
to arrive Friday, but are probably going to get in for Saturday games.
Interesting.
That feels like it could open the door.
It could.
It could open the door. I mean, Karen Earhart is obviously going to be one of the best players of this tournament. Alyssa Earhart has been a key part of Carleton for her brief, I guess. How do you even call it? Like, it's been a couple of years on the one hand, but it's also only been one season. I don't know what you say about that, but that doesn't quite scare me off this team. They still have Nariah Sims. Alyssa Earhart is not going to be there. They could fill in with Caitlin Ear, big drop off, right? Carly Campana, this is a good team. They have Tori Gray, who's going to be one of the best first year players of the tournament. Carleton stacked. And so even without their hearts, I think that might tighten the score a little bit, but I'm not afraid of their ability to walk through this pool.
Any Chicago hype, Keith?
I was pretty hyped on Chicago coming into the season, if you want to call it that. Disappointing regionals. There's just no way around it. They lose 11-9 to Purdue, who they did beat later in the tournament, 13-5. But that's a scary result. And their sectionals results are middling, but I do think the talent is there. I mean, there's some elite club experience from players like Cassie Brown, some players who've been key contributors for them for a number of years, whether it's Claire Schmidt or Caitlin Tien. They pick up Jocelyn Sun. She's a big-time recruit. She's a U20 player. So I think Chicago is a pretty strong 4 seed. I think that they have a shot at being the strongest 4 seed. And I certainly think they could upset McCarthy-less Vermont if that's what it comes to. And maybe even a Vermont team with Kennedy McCarthy.
Should be interesting to see. I agree. Like, if you're not dominating in a weak region, it probably bodes poorly for your chances to beat, some of the really talented, experienced teams ahead of you in your pool. I think a pre-quarters finish for Chicago would be a really good result for them. Florida State, I think, just isn't going to have the horses. They've got some great athletes. I just don't think they have enough offensive firepower to beat these teams in front of them. Okay, let's move on to Pool B. And North Carolina, Western Washington, Georgia, UC Davis, and Ohio. So, of course, UNC will be the big favorite here as well. But Western Washington's not a pushover, Keith.
Absolutely not. I mean, to me, this is the toughest pool, Charlie. To me, shout out to the tops of Pool C and Pool D, but Pool B is deep. I think this Davis team is going to be good as the 4 seed. I think Ohio they still have the potential to be the best 5 seed. Western Washington, we know that people are going to underestimate them. But when you look at the names on this team, and this is a team with years of college nationals experience. I mean, they have been there, and yeah, the roster is very small, so you're going to see a lot of Samia Ishmael and Tova Breen and Eleanor Jocelyn. But I think they're going to be fine, running a tight rotation and, probably leaning on some zone. It's going to be a taxing tournament for them, but I think that they're going to be fine handling that workload given the amount of experience and talent on the team. Georgia, we saw have a good run through the series. The word on the street of them is pretty good. So, I'm a little cool on what they're actually going to be able to put forth in such a tough pool. And then obviously UNC is a superpower team.
Yeah, I think Georgia, to me, having seen them in person, they're clearly more talented and polished than the other Southeast teams. They just dominated. But I think part of that is that they can just convert with more consistency, but they still turn it over a lot. That doesn't work at nationals. And I think that results that you see from them this season, so they easily win all of their series games, but they did play at Fusion. And I go, they easily win 6 games, then they play UNC and lose 13-4. Which, I think is a sign of how good UNC is, but I also think it shows you that there's levels, and I think that they're a level behind Western Washington. So I expect this pool mostly to go to seed, although I do think Davis has the opportunity to upset a Georgia and maybe even a Western Washington. I'm with you, Keith. I think that they're a tough 4 seed.
Absolutely. I think if I had to pick, I would take Davis to upset Georgia. The Southwest, I don't think we were wrong to put so many Southwest teams near the top of our power rankings. And Davis came out of there, they lost by 4 to UCSB. They beat UCLA twice, including thumping them 14-6 at the back end of the weekend. They played close with UC San Diego, 11-8. So I think that Davis is going to prove to be a really tough 4 seed, and I could see them getting upsets in this pool, that's for sure.
Okay, let's move on to Pool C. UCSB, Pittsburgh, Michigan, and Boston University. Now, before we get to anything else, Keith, there is a wager on the line. Tell us about it.
All right, so we had some not so nice things to say about Boston University. I went on a rant.
No. Hang on. What did we say? We said they shouldn't be seated ahead of the Metro East winner, SUNY Binghamton.
And I stand by that.
Their way into nationals, they had to have another team decline their bid, and it wasn't even close.
They lost the game to go by a lot.
Okay, so these are facts that were being discussed right now. There is no hate. This is just facts. So continue and tell us about the wager.
All right, so one of the coaches of Boston University, in I think it's also a bid to motivate his team. Sent us a bet. Said, hey, let's make a bet that BU is going to break seed. Yes, he says I've been summoned in the chat. That's true. Welcome, Sam Farnsworth, to the chat. A bet on the team, and so I propose the bet. If Boston University breaks seed at the tournament, then we'll record an ad on behalf of the team to run on the show. So why you should, if you're at BU, join the team, and if you're not at BU, why you should go to BU. We'll cut an ad for why they are so great and their program is someone you should join. If they fail to break seed, so if they finish 19th or 20th at the tournament, whole team's got to go onto their phones, open up their apps, and smash the subscribe button.
And to be clear, that means that they basically lose all their games because there's no final placement. They play one consolation game after pool play. I guess you can't actually
finish 20th, right? You have to finish tie.
They play a 17th place game. No. I think if they lose all their games, we win the bet. I think that's very clear. win their consolation game or they win a game in pool play, then they win the bet.
No. I actually think we just have to restructure the bet in the spirit of the bet, because I don't think Sam was playing us here. You literally can't finish lower than 17th. So
No, you can't.
By virtue of showing up,
if you lose, you finish. If you
finish 17th.
15th place game, you're tied for 19th.
So I think that that's not necessarily what he was going for. He wasn't trying to trick us into being like, look, we automatically finished 17th at worst, so you've taken a fool's bet. So they have to win a game. If they don't win any games, basically, that's the bet. If they don't win any games, I guess, what if they win a game in pool play and still finish 5th in the pool?
I think we would give them credit for having broken seed at that point, in my opinion.
Okay, so that is the bet. They win any games or not? That is the question.
Well, hold on. Unless they win a game where like another team sits all of its starters because they've already locked the pool or something like that.
Oh, I don't want to I don't want to have the bet come down to like us defining whether or not a game is.
Well, then fine. They have to win their 17th place, or if they're in that 17th place game, they have to win it.
Yeah. Okay, Sam, you're in the chat, so you can verify if that works for you. Either the team wins the 17th place game or doesn't have to play in the 17th place game. Those are the qualifications.
He says this team is pure adrenaline. So
we'll
see what happens. They've got a tough pool in front of them, Keith. What do you think about it?
So I was very high on Pittsburgh, and I stand by that. I think this pool is also tough. This is the other pool I would argue is the strongest pool. I mean, UCSB. There's some talk that they could really be a team that could push UNC and Carleton, and I understand where that comes from. Jasmine Childress, Caitlin Weaver. We had Caitlin on the show. She talked about some of the added depth that they've had, and those are scary words. For them to be getting good recruits and not have. This is a team that felt like they had a lot of offensive skill concentrated in a couple of players, and they had to ride that. I mean, that has been the way the Burning Skirts have worked through time immemorial. But they're trying to build out the depth, and the idea of Caitlin Weaver not having to carry the offensive load, I mean, that could really unlock a lot of things for this team. But Pittsburgh and Texas, I mean, Texas played tough with Colorado at regionals. Pittsburgh, I still think we kind of have to take Ohio Valley regionals with like some big grains of salt. But Pittsburgh's super deep. I think they benefited a lot from what we saw out of that Parcha team, which a number of these players were on Parcha. So that's going to be a really valuable experience for them. They've added some good young players too, even some good veterans. They have some good transfers coming in. So I think that the top three in this pool is quite good, and that's a tough draw for our friends at BU or our enemies at BU, depending on how you look at it, as well as for a Michigan team that's also in this pool at the 4th spot and has some talent, but I think it's going to be tough for them to get one over on teams that's good.
I mean, I think the interesting question for me in this pool is who wins it. Is Pitt up to the task of beating a UCSB? I think the answer is no. I think UCSB, with all of the alums, is just going to be a little bit too good. And I think the fact that they won Southwest Regionals tells you that. But I'm curious to see how talented Pittsburgh looks. Generally, I'm feeling a little low on the South Central. I think that Colorado and Texas are probably going to underperform a little bit. I just don't know if I feel like I've seen enough from Colorado to think that, well, we'll get to Pool D in a second. But yeah, I don't see Texas upsetting UCSB or Pitt here. So, I think eyes for me on that 1-2 game, going to be an interesting battle. And Jasmine Childress show up just for nationals for UCSB. The Callahan reel hype is real right now.
Absolutely. I've been a big supporter of Caitlin Weaver, but Jasmine Childress had an awesome college season in 2019. We get the D-Pody matchup here. I mean, these are two of the three players from the D-Pody podium last year, which was won by Nariah Sips from Carleton. But Jasmine Childress and Jessie Sun, both back for these teams, and I think are going to be in big roles. I don't even know if they're going to get how much defense they're going to get to play, given that I think they're both going to be in pretty sizable offensive roles for these teams too. But there's a lot of talent, and I could definitely see that matchup going Pittsburgh's way, even though I think UCSB is really good. I mean, I like both these teams a lot.
Pool D, let's move on. Washington, Colorado, Virginia, Penn, and SUNY Binghamton. So, Washington, Colorado, Virginia, the 4-5-9. To me, Keith, is the typical 4-5-9 because I don't think Virginia really belongs. But what do you think?
I've had the same feeling. I don't know that I see the same kind of like challenger status from Virginia that we've seen from other 9 seeds. Now the AC really tough region, so getting out of there, they deserve a lot of credit for that.
Sure.
But they don't feel like they have a real push for semifinals in them. If you flip this into Texas or Georgia or Davis, I might have that more of that traditional 4-5-9 feeling. But I can't really get all that jazzed about Virginia as the 9 seed in this pool. And that makes me really look at the 4-5 matchup, which, in many times does end up being one of the defining matchups of the tournament because it has the implications of who's going to get the bye in the quarterfinal round.
So, what do you think about the top here, Keith? I mean, Washington, Colorado, has probably been the more sort of like historically successful team in the recent past, but Washington on the come up for sure. So many young stars on this team. I think they had a good chance to make a big splash in 2020 series. Got cut short, of course. Now, does this team have a chance to win a title? I mean, maybe we should just save that and let's just talk about the Washington-Colorado matchup. We can get to elements, opportunity to win an actual championship in a bit. But, do you see Colorado having a chance to get the upset here?
I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, I think this matchup may be closer than we expect. I think people are underrating the experience on this Colorado team a little bit and overrating the talent on Washington, a team that we, for the most part, have never really seen do it. I mean, when's the last time that you saw this Washington team coalesce and deliver on the talent that they have? I mean, the roster, you can be very impressed with them, and I certainly am, but have we seen them come together and get a big signature win? Can you think of a signature Washington win? Because I can think of signature Colorado wins, even when we thought they haven't been that talented. And I think that has a lot of value for Colorado. I mean, I don't think that they're going to be a pushover. They've got Emma Capra feels like she's been a key player in nationals for like 15 years in a row. Rachel Wilmoth is back for them. I mean, these are players who've been impactful at the elite club level. A bunch of players who've been in key positions for them throughout the years, whether it's Sarah Nadler, Jordan Stockdale, Sarah Lostra. I mean, this is a strong team. Plus, of course, they added Chloe Phillips. Now, the injuries to this team are well known, and it's a big downer. You wish that they had all the talent that it could be on the roster. And I think that's ultimately going to leave them a little shortchanged against a Washington team that has Abby Hacko and Alexa Yanema and some pretty strong recruits of their own. But I think this matchup is probably going to be closer than maybe we might make it at first glance.
SUNY Binghamton playing with just 13 players on the roster at nationals. Good luck. Good luck. Have fun.
Look, honestly, it's probably to their advantage, right? You got to think that SUNY Binghamton's losing games when, players 9 through 18 are getting on the field and competing against other 9 through 18s at more established programs. I mean, I think this is a team that's going to put about a 10-player rotation out there and ask their top 4 to do a lot of work. That's what I'm expecting.
We're streaming Virginia versus SUNY Binghamton in round 1 on Friday. Tune in to watch Samantha Gonzalez. She's legit. She's gonna be an impressive player at nationals. I predict that right now.
And this is not a one horse team. I wouldn't say. Watching them on tape. I mean, it was the offense pretty concentrated in their top 4. Yeah, but it was not one person hucking it a lot. That was not what the game looked like. I think that they're probably a little bit better than people expect. I don't know if that's going to be enough to get them wins in this pool. We probably should talk about UPenn, considering that our fellow podcast host and UPenn coach from Laying It Out, Chelsea did have some clarifying statements about some of our assessments of UPenn based on their performance at regionals. Basically, that we were a little bit over focused on the fact that they got blown up by Pitt in a game that to them didn't really matter and they weren't really playing very hard in, as opposed to them performing better on Sunday than on Saturday when they were running a little more open lines. So maybe UPenn could have the chops to upset Virginia. I guess I couldn't completely rule it out. I don't think Virginia stinks or anything. I just don't think they're as good as our usual 9 seed.
Yeah, I mean, regionals, they lose 11-1 to Ohio and then beat them 8-6 later in the weekend. I don't really know how to interpret results like that. Very odd. Um, I think that because of the Virginia being a little bit weaker as the 3 seed, I think that Penn will have a chance to win 2 games. I don't think they will have a chance to beat the top 2 teams. I don't think SUNY Binghamton will have a chance to beat the top 2 teams. It's just like they're not even going to know how to compete in those games because it's just not, they haven't played teams like that except Pitt. So then it's like, okay, can you beat a Virginia? Maybe. Maybe. And the 4-5 game in this pool could be interesting. But I think, Virginia's probably just to cut their teeth against tougher competition. So I think my baseline expectation is that this pool basically goes to seed.
I think that that's a pretty reasonable. Like if you were going to bet on a pool to go to seed, I think this is the most likely one. You know, Virginia put up 5 on UNC. Is that like their best result of the year? They beat App State 12-9. I mean, could we be sleeping on them? I guess it's possible, but I don't know if there's a lot of evidence for it.
But good luck to Pockets coaching for this team, for UPenn. And I think it's cool to have the team there. And, it feels like a team that should be at nationals sometimes, like this was the Anna Thompson team, like we need to see them at nationals. If only Anna Thompson was still eligible. Wouldn't that be something?
I'm curious to see who's going to be like stepping up for them because I think that we could come away learning some new names from games like this. I mean, they have a real chance of making it to the pre-quarters.
Okay, let's get to our picks. Keith, who you taking to?
All right. So my pool winners are going to be, as you would expect, I have Carleton and UNC winning their pools. I also have UCSB winning their pool, and I have Washington winning their pool. So I'm going with the chalk. I think there could be some scares, but I couldn't figure out how to make anything else work.
I'm with you in the chalk department. I just think that those, again, we can see the top teams looking like just really the most talented sides at the tournament. And so I have Carleton facing off against Western Washington in quarters. I have UCSD going up against UNC. Colorado, I had Vermont, but I have to get off it. I'm taking Colorado to win that pre-quarter against Vermont and get into the game against UCSB. And I have Pittsburgh getting into the game against Washington, which I think will be the most interesting quarterfinal. Keith, who you got making those quarters, and then give us your set.
Man, I hope Kennedy McCarthy gets upgraded from questionable to in. I hope so. That would add a lot of spice and just such a fun player to watch. But so I have Carleton over Texas in their quarterfinal. I have UC Santa Barbara over Colorado. Also have making it there. I have UNC beating UC San Diego, and then I have Pitt upsetting Washington. I'm gonna lean on my Pitt love. Lean into the Washington. Hasn't been there before. I'm going with Pitt to get the upset. I got to get in my upset somewhere, and this is the one I'm targeting. Also means I have Western Washington not making it. That's in part due to UC Davis performing well in pool play.
Look, I get the history that Washington has had, but I just think that I sat and thought about this Washington Pitt quarter that I'm also projecting for a little while, and I just feel like the depth of is there for Washington in a way that's not quite there for Pitt. And so I am calling for Washington to get over at least some of their demons to get into the semifinals with a win over Pittsburgh in quarters. In the other games, I have Carleton beating Western Washington. Did I already say this? I have UNC beating San Diego, and I have Santa Barbara beating Colorado. So I am ultimately, again, I don't know what's going on with me. I feel like I've done this all year, and I was wrong at Club Nationals about this. I'm like taking the top seeds to win and get all the way to semis. This feels like a mistake to me, but I also cannot justify picking any of these upsets when I feel incredibly confident about Carleton and UNC and UCSB. And then it's really just that Washington Pitt game. And I'm going with Washington over Pitt, but I think it's going to be close. So I do have the top 4 seeds making semis.
I have in semis. I have UNC beating UC San Diego. No, wait, sorry, that's quarters. I have UNC beating UCSB. I think UCSB gives them a good scare. I think that they're legit. And then I have Carleton taking Pitt down, giving us that fateful UNC Carleton matchup that's been long awaited.
I'm calling it too. I think Santa Barbara is going to put up a bigger fight against UNC than people expect, but I do think that Pleiades will come away the winner of that one. I think Carleton easily beats Washington, and we are on to the matchup we've all been waiting to see for over 2 years, and that is UNC versus Carleton. Keith, who you got?
Pity that honestly, like I would be upset if we don't get this matchup. You know what I mean? I'd feel a little robbed if we don't get to see what these two teams get to do when they're taking each other on. We both had UNC winning the men's division. We talked about this. It's been a long, long time. I went all the way back and counted it out. I don't remember if it was 2000 or 1999 since the last time that a team won both divisions. But I'm picking UNC to do it here. I've got UNC beating Carleton in the final. I don't know how to square the fact that we're doing all that. We're talking about all this without Ann Worth being a factor, but I just UNC looks really, really good. Maybe it's just coming off of this club season and seeing what this young Phoenix team could do, but many of these players were key players. Like they weren't just on Phoenix and like hanging out on the sidelines, getting some D-line reps.
That's what I'm saying.
Bridget Meisner was one of the best players on Phoenix. She was one of the best players in the semifinals. Ella Youngst, Dawn Colton,
Tyler Smith,
Grace Connerly, Tyler Smith. Like these are players who were not just there; they were involved. And there's depth beyond that. Alex Barnett probably doesn't get mentioned enough. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about UNC, and I've got them beating Carleton in the final.
I do too. In fact, I think it could be not that close. UNC 2.5-point favorites, maybe 3.5-point favorites.
I don't think you give them 3.5 on.
I'm a little nervous for Carleton because so many of the Carleton players didn't play club. I feel like that's a negative. That has to be a negative. We saw these UNC players getting it done and almost getting to the national final. And like obviously there are players on that team, on the Phoenix team that are graduated from UNC or never went to UNC. It's not like it was just players from UNC. But like you said, many of their top contributors are currently on this Pleiades roster. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Carleton is going to be very tough. They're going to be very tough. Kate Lanier, Mariah Sims, Maya Powell, the Earhart sisters. You go down the list. They are very, very. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to get past, again, the continuity, the coaching, the club season playing together. I just feel like this is the year. It's just all UNC. It's all North Carolina. I'm taking the double up UNC over Carleton.
Wow. So we got the repeat champions. Charlie, what do you have? You have the top 4 seeds in semifinals in both.
I do.
Both divisions.
I do.
Just all chalk all the time.
I don't like it. I don't like it. But I also think that they are the most talented teams, not just the highest seeded teams. Like, think about it this way, right? In a normal year, one of these teams would have had like somewhat of a lackluster regular season and would have been knocked down to a 6 or a 7 seed, and we might be picking them. But instead, This is like out of our power ranking.
Well, this is where I think our approach here is differed in picks, because I kind of agree with you actually. Like if I were just taking the most talented teams, I probably would end up pretty aligned with exactly where you are. But I'm trying to find those spots where I think where I see the chance for there to be a misstep and figure out where those upset places are going to be.
And you're
not because
wedging
I
through
think
the door.
Yeah, and I feel like there's going to be some upsets. I mean, I've been clear about that. I feel like they're going to be somewhere, and I know that it's difficult to figure out which ones are going to be there. So I'm just looking for the ones that I think have maybe a slightly bigger chance of being an upset than somewhere else, and hoping that I get it right, because even though I might say that your picks have a higher chance, like median outcome of being right, if mine are right, it's going to be worth more. You know what I mean? If you nail the right upsets, you look like a true genius. If you just pick chalk and it's right, everybody's like, well, that was easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm over here picking plus 300 picks, and Charlie's
Listen,
come
I
up with minus
respect it.
130.
I'm picking what I believe is going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that the picks that you have might actually have a slightly
I
higher
don't
chance of occurring than mine. So
I don't
I'm
like
with
it.
you.
I don't like making dull, chalky picks, but I also think that we have some historically great teams at the top that I feel like are almost locks to get at least to semifinals.
I'll be very curious how this compares to like what we're talking about next May.
I can't wait to talk about it all next week and during the tournament as we take a look at how it all shakes out because show up at the college. Okay, it's time to get to our hashtag the game picks. Keith, break down the rules for us. How does the game work at the college championships?
All right, so for those of you whose first game experience was the club, pay attention because this is a different game. Same idea that you got to pick teams, and their wins are what's going to get you there. You're looking at ultimately this is a pick'em game, but this time there is no cap. You don't have to pick teams of a certain seed. Instead, you're encouraged to do that because teams of lower seeds get more points per win. So the way that this works is that whatever your team seed, the teams that you pick, whatever seed they are in their pool becomes their kind of like assigned seed. And you get that seed number times 10 for every game that they win. So if the number one seed in a pool, let's say the Carleton women, wins a game, they get 10 points in pool play and pre-quarters. But if the number 4 team in their pool, Chicago, wins a game, they get 40 points. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, you're with me. So that's all the way through pre-quarters. You also get bonus points for winning your pool. That's worth 20 bonus points. We have changed the scoring this year. And then wins in quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals are all worth 15 points. So they're now equal. Used to be you get more points for winning your semifinal or winning the final. But I thought there was too much conglomeration around trying to pick the title teams every year.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying out a little bit different scoring system so that it's more about finding the teams that, surprise a little bit. Along with a balance of the teams that are likely to do well in the tournament. Because obviously you're going to get more points if your team has more games to play. Consolation games don't count. So you're looking for teams that are going to make bracket runs, but you're getting a lot more points with those lower seeded teams if they are the teams that go deep in the bracket.
Are we making how many teams do we pick here?
You get 5 teams, and you can't have more than 3 in one division. So in one division you're going to get 3, in one division you're going to get 2.
Right. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I have a list of teams. I actually don't know which of these teams I specifically want, but I always wonder about this. Like, do I want to align directly with my picks? Because, is it too? Am I putting too much in one pot if I go with that? But I think that might be the way for me to go. So I have a list of teams that I like, and then I have to whittle this down to 5. From those. So one team that I like a lot, and I talked about this at length in the podcast, is UC Davis on the women's side. So I am going to take UC Davis. They're a 4 seed. I definitely think they have a shot at winning. Not just one, anywhere between like 1. They could even win 3 games, I think. So in pool play, that would set me up huge as a 4 seed. I think they're totally underseeded. I will take them. I mean, it's hard because I will say you're not really incentivized to pick the number 3 overall or number 4 overall seed because they're worth as much as picking the number 1 overall seed. So that leads me away from those kinds of teams. So like a team that I like a lot, like Brown, it doesn't really make sense when I think that UNC on the men's side has so much better of a chance of doing really well. So I'm going to go to the 2 line. I'm going to take the Pitt women as well. So I have my minimum 2 women's teams. UNC men, they just feel like it's like impossible for me to see them not doing well. So I'm going to take the UNC men on the men's side. My second men's team, I'm really not sure where I want to go, Charlie. I'm not sure. I've got Pitt, Wilmington, Michigan, Northeastern, all as potential teams. I never like picking teams in the same pool, but I'm really thinking about taking Michigan here. For me, I think it's between Michigan and Wilmington. Man. All right. I'm going to take Michigan. I'm going to leave the right to change these for my official picks that go into the actual game, but I'm going to go with Michigan for right now. I've sang their praises. I've explained why. So I get a bonus team, my last team from either division, and I think I'm going to go with UNC women. The UNC women. I think
Okay.
that they're another team that's just like failure feels like an impossibility to me. Are they going to win the title? No, but like I don't see how they don't make it to semifinals. Like it's just so many points you're just locking up.
Yeah. So I just did the math. If you're a top seed in your pool and you win all your games, so you win the pool and then you win the championship, that's worth 105 points in the game. So that's kind of like a baseline of where you feel like you need to get break even. So like I'm probably if I'm thinking I want to take the UNC teams that I expect to win the title, and that includes the 20 bonus points and whatnot, 105 points. So the thing is, if you want to take a 4 seed in a pool, all they got to do is win 3 games, and you're outscoring the title winning 1 seed. So the thing is, winning 3 games is a little tricky, So you have to kind of find that balance of like a team that has enough upside to deliver. I think as much as I would love to pick, I think it's possible this year. There's too thin at the bottom of the pools right now. I don't really see the upside there. So here's what I'm thinking. First pick, in the men's division, I'm going to take NC State. They're a 3 seed in their pool. They're the highest. They're the 9 overall, so they're the highest ranked 3 seed. Even if they lose to Brown and Pitt, I think they get 2 wins. That's 60 points, and I think they win their pre-quarter. So that's 90 points. And I think there's enough upside that they could get an upset in pool play or win a quarterfinal even. Like I think they're a really good team. So I like NC State there as just a team that I think has legit upside, and I expect to see in quarters. Okay, so staying in the men's division, it's so much harder for me to see value elsewhere in the lower seeds. I think my other pick is UNC men because, like I said, I think I can feel pretty confident I'm going to get 60 points. I feel really confident I'm going to get 75 points minimum,
Right.
which is them winning the pool, winning all their games. The potential risk of them losing a game in pool play because they don't need to win it and they sit their starters or something. I didn't look closely enough at the schedule to see if that's like a realistic thing that could happen. So that's a 10-point potential risk there, but I think almost guaranteed to make semis, and I feel like pretty good about their chances of at least getting to the final, if not winning it outright. So those are my 2 teams there. Over to the women's division. See, same thing here. Like I just don't see enough potential upside in the lower seeds to go with those teams. I think I'm going to take. Now, the question is it worth taking Pittsburgh, even if I think they're going to lose to UCSB? So that would mean they get 60 points if they win their other 3 games. They get another 20 points for winning their pre-quarter. That's 80. And then I feel like they've got a chance to win their quarter, which would put them at 95. But then I don't really see them going further than that. So at that point, I feel like I have to take the team that I think is going to win the whole thing. So I'm taking UNC. Same reasoning there. I feel pretty strongly that they're going to get 90, if not more. So then after that, my second team.
It's interesting because the way you laid it out, like you kind of need, if you're going to take one of the 1 seeds, like you really kind of need them to make finals.
You need them to
like
make
it's worth
finals.
it. And obviously if you pick, for example, Carleton, you're capping, one of those teams can't win. So that's going to hurt you, but they could. So it's like, how likely do you think they are to
90
both
then.
make finals?
Max 90.
Yeah, missing out on that 25 points, just capping that you're not going to get those 25 points is difficult.
I'm going to take the best 2 seed, and I think that's Pittsburgh.
Okay, that was kind of my logic.
I think I'm gonna take my chances there. I think they're gonna win at least 3 games of pool play and make it to quarters. So that's 80 points with upside. Because all they're gonna, maybe taking Carlton makes more sense, but I'd rather
You're still good. You got a 5th team.
I know, but maybe Pitt upsets UCSB, at which point, boom. So now I got to think about my final team here. I certainly could take a team that I think is going to make it to the final, which would be, either Colorado men or Carleton women. I would take Carleton women in that case, just because I think I have sort of higher conviction that they're going to go all the way to the final. And let's see, are there other lower teams that I think could make a run? I just feel everything feels so high risk. I'm going to take Carleton women.
All
So
right.
there it is.
Like
I
your
don't,
picks, very very chalky.
I don't love that. It's hard for me to envision where a 4 seed makes a big run, wins 3 games in pool play, and wins their pre-quarter. Because like if you pick that team, you're going to be in really good shape.
I mean,
NC State
the
is my
logic makes sense too.
my NC State pick is my sort of like high upside potential play.
Yep. So those are our Charlie and I's game picks. You go over to the site, get yours in. We've got prizes for the winners. It's one of many contests that we're running. We're also going to have a game for Division 3, I believe, which will be more in the club style since there's only 16 teams. We also have Fantasy Ultimate, and we have the Beat Charlie Challenge, where you get to put your picks in against Charlie and I's. And if you beat Charlie, it doesn't really matter if you beat me. Beating me, it's not, according to Mike Ball, isn't even really that big an accomplishment. So you beat Charlie. If you're one of the folks who beats Charlie, you get entered into a random drawing to win the prize. So all you gotta do is get over Charlie, which can be tough, but all you have to do is not pick the chalk now at this point.
I'm going perfect brackets this year.
Nail it. Be unbeatable. If you pick the perfect bracket, you just can't lose.
Can't lose.
We'll give out no prize. You get the prizes, Charlie.
That I was just gloat about that forever. If we get to
that would be
point.
Amazing. Yeah, if you don't fill out a whole thing, like you'll never get the perfect bracket.
I know. Well, I'm gonna put my picks in very shortly. All right, so excited to get it all going. Again, coverage begins 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern on Friday. In partnership with USA Ultimate, we are streaming 2 games per round all weekend long. And hey, we're also going to be streaming a bunch of D3. We're going to have all 4 D3 semifinals and the D1 finals streamed on YouTube through the USA Ultimate World YouTube channel. Keith, let's take a quick look at D3. Who are you taking to win the tournament in D3?
Woo, that is tough. You want to talk about not having a ton of data? This is it. Man, in the men's division, definitely feels to me like the top 2 seeds are in the best position. Richmond's deep. They've got a lot of talent. Middlebury has fallen off a little bit, I would say, from where they were a couple of years ago when they were, seemed like far and away the top team. But St. Olaf has some impressive results. The word is that they're pretty good. I think I'm going to. Man, do I take the upset? No, I think I'm going to ride with the number 1 overall seed here, Richmond, and the reigning Callahan winner. I mean, I think that they have like 3 or 4 potential first team All-Americans. So I'm going to take Richmond as the men's champion. What do you have on that side?
I am going to take Middlebury. Leo Silva Fernandez. Don't forget. Are they as good as the team that won in 19? No, probably not. But I still think that they're, experienced. They've done it. They have a lot of players who remain extremely talented. I think certainly an interesting team, but I don't know. I don't know that I see. They get some of their alums back, which I think is a big deal. Chris Casella, who did some reporting for UltiWorld this season and is currently at Texas, is actually not playing with Texas because he's going back to play with his undergrad team in Richmond. They're going to be good. They're going to be really good.
He's one of those like all-American quality players. I mean, the guy's good.
They're going to be really good. But I'm still taking Middlebury. On the women's side, I think I'm going to take Carleton Eclipse.
Oh, I think I was going to take Carleton Eclipse.
Yeah, I just think always going to be a tough team because of just the great recruiting that Carleton does as an overall university. I'm not sure I can buy Truman State as the 1 seed.
The thing that I feel like we've seen in the past is, it's kind of a star driven division, the women's D3. I mean, I think that in a lot of cases, if you have a couple of really elite players, that's been crucial to being successful. Like we haven't seen a lot of like teams without that do really well at nationals. But so that like leads me to like maybe a team like Portland, where you see like Kim Dorr, but they also lost some key talent. So I think that's going to lead me back to Carleton. I like really any of the top 5 seeds. I think it's pretty open. Can I pick Lehigh to represent for laying it out? I could do that. I think I'm gonna stick with Carleton, but I think that this is a pretty open race.
Liam Day, who plays for Richmond, pointed out in the chat that one of their grads also went to the national championships with Slow White. I mean, now it's just Slow. I think Richmond, but Middlebury's been there more recently, and I think that matters. And in college, we've seen it time and time again. So, look, should be fun. That could very well be the final because am I right about that? Richmond's the 2, right? No. Middlebury's the 3. So Olaf and Middlebury, if everything goes to seed, would play in semis, and then we could get a Richmond-Middlebury final. Should be a fun one if it happens.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect from this tournament, but I'm definitely looking forward to some really great ultimate there.
All right, well, that is going to do it for this live edition of Deep Look. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for talking with us in the chat. And can't wait for some college ultimate action. Lots of preview content coming your way on ultiworld.com this week. And should be, I just want to say, if you're listening, you're a college player or you're a fan heading out this way, make sure you dress warm. It could be a little chilly in the mornings and in the evenings because, very short days right now. The skies are only going to be in the low 60s. So having been here for a few days in the Southern California area, I have been wearing my jacket quite a bit. So I would recommend wearing layers. Players will probably be comfortable in regular jerseys and shorts once they're playing in the game, but you'll want to have layers for sure.
And sideline personnel, remember, especially if it's your first time being sideline, if you're like an alum or something,
you do a lot of standing around.
It's not the same as playing. You do a lot of standing, you get real cold.
You do. All right. Let us know if you have thoughts at Deep Look Pod on Twitter, deeplook@ultiworld.com. Hit us up in the Ultiworld Discord if you're a Fuller Plus subscriber. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to catch our subscriber bonus segment as well. You can become a subscriber for less than $4 a month at ultiworld.com/subscribe. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we will talk to you during the